water supplies. Now, our problems are similar, except not quite such big numbers at this time. City water engineers are advocating a traditional solution, an engineering project to tap into the underground waters beneath remote valleys of eastern Nevada. They propose a system of 145 huge wells spread across nearly 20% of the state and connected by 1,000 miles of pipeline. Cost estimates range from $1.5 billion to $4 billion. Environmental costs may be as high or higher if less easy to quantify. Critics contend that groundwater pumping will lower the water table, destroying streams and marshes that sustain migratory waterfowl and nourish plant and wildlife oases in desert basins, including distant Death Valley National Monument in California. Even there, in the hottest desert in North America, water lies beneath the ground. Fearful for the future, the National Park Service has filed formal protest against this project. Water reformers throughout the West are beginning to question these expensive, environmentally damaging water transfer projects. They insist that there's a better way. If Westerners would strongly promote conservation and develop plans to recycle and reuse existing water supplies, there would be no immediate need for more such projects. Reformers point to Tucson, Arizona, as a good example of a desert city that today supports growth by conserving and reusing water. More and more streets and parks are planted with the trees and flowering plants of the surrounding Sonoran Desert. Residents receive free pamphlets explaining xeriscoping, the art of landscaping with low water use plants. City ordinances require low-flow toilets, shower heads and faucets, and the city has even shared the cost of more efficient toilets for older homes. Many golf courses and parks are watered with treated sewage effluent. Tucson residents are proud of their distinctive desert city image. The payoff is clear. On a per capita basis, Tucson now consumes about half the water of Las Vegas, where conservation is still voluntary. As the following article makes starkly clear, communities dependent on the Colorado River are facing a crisis. The river is being used to the fullest, and the region is now in its 5th year of drought. As urban populations continue to grow, the battle between the traditional water engineers, known in the West as water buffaloes, and the emerging reform movement will surely intensify. The question, as yet unanswered, is whether man can live and prosper with nature, respecting the limits of our desert environment. Now, we have the same problem here. We have a population of approximately 5,000, and we expect that in the near future, in the projected future, like these men are projecting, that we'll have the same proportionate kind of a problem. And where we're going to get the water is going to be a question. And I will address a prophecy and a statement of Uncle Roy's a little later in the program. Right now, let's go on with the program. We'll have a song by all participants on the program, and this song was adapted by Richard Allred.
Sunshine in my soul today, more glorious and bright.
just a minute before Scott comes and gives us a little narration on some of the history of the water in this valley, I would like to read a statement of Uncle Roy made on October the 28th, 1962. Brother Musser, with the Spirit of God on him, told us that if we could go and keep the commandments of God in this place, that the ground would become productive. He said it would become so productive of the necessities of life that 1 acre of ground here would produce 10 times what 1 acre of ground would produce in Salt Lake Valley. That's quite a prophecy. But in those days, I was teetering in the balance. I didn't know whether to stay in this place or go somewhere else. But the Lord blessed us with such crops here on dry land that I finally decided to stay after He showed me what the place would look like if it were handled properly. And I have seen some of the fulfillment of those inspirations that were given to us. We'll now have some history from Scott.
In 1940, the only water to be had in the Short Creek Valley was that run naturally down the canyon, running through the sand, and so you can understand there really wasn't much time. It run 3 miles through the sand to the point of use. And there were some hand-dug wells. And these wells, hand-dug, 4 or 5 feet in diameter, 20 to 30 feet deep, had to be rocked down as they was dug into the loose sand. So you can understand there was a lot of work involved. And all you could get was a small amount of water in the bottom of these hand-dug wells. And there was locations where you couldn't even dig a well and get water. And these wells were pumped either by a bucket on a rope, wind it up and pull 1 bucket at a time out, or a hand-operated piston pump, something like you see over here. Until the windmills first came in the 1930s. The windmills operated on the same principle as the hand pump. The wind would turn a gearbox when the wind was blowing, lift a rod up and down, which would a little squirt of water each time it went up and down. The main water hole at this early time was at Orland Colvin's windmill, which was just west of J&B Automotive. And there's still some evidence of that old rock tank and that location. And it was during this early period that the ditch along the East Mountain was started in the 1930s. And this ditch, when it was first surveyed, was surveyed with a water hose. To give you some illustration how that would be done without a transit, I've colored the water here a little so you can see what's happening. With a long hose, you could spread that out down the ditch, allow it to equalize, sight between, and get your levels to determine where the cuts in the fields had to be. Hose had to be open on the ends so that the water could equalize. See, I move the hose, the water finds its level. If I close the end, it doesn't work. It wasn't until the CCC camp came and was established in the vicinity of the Barlow University campus, and a 2-inch galvanized steel line was run from that area to the spring in Jans Canyon. about 3 miles. Jans Canyon is the west fork of Maxwell Canyon as you go up past Maxwell Park. This pipeline, 3 miles in total length, and there is about 1 mile of that original pipeline that we're still using today.
been asked to give a few water facts. The fact is, we need water. And yet, water is the most common substance on the Earth's surface. And when you think how big the Earth is, 25,000 miles around, 70% of that surface is water. It's in the oceans. Water's in the lakes and rivers on the land. Water's under the land in the aquifers in the ground. Water's in the air in the form of water vapor in the clouds. Water's everywhere, most of the time, except when you seem to need it real bad, like this poor prospector up here. You know, the human body is made up of 65% water. I've had people tell me I was a great big drink of water before, but 65%? But chickens, you know, chickens are only 75% water. And pineapples, they're 80% water. Now, if you have a little trouble, like some students sometimes do with percents, 80%, if you had 5 people, 80% is 4 of them. So 4/5, 4 out of 5, 4/5 is 80%. That's a lot of water. You know, water not only is on the surface and in the ground and above the ground, it's impacting that ground that it's on. In the form of erosion, water shapes the face of the earth. Rain falling, waves beating upon the shore, rivers cutting canyons, flooding, the whole process of erosion is mostly water. The greatest force working on the surface of the earth to shape it. When we talk about our surroundings, we often, if we don't have anything else to talk about the climate. Well, climate is water. Temperature and water. We tell whether it's hot or cold, whether it's rainy or dry, or more dry. Great civilizations have been founded where water was plentifully available. And great civilizations have fallen when that water has ceased to be available. It even influences daily lives of people. We saw a few cowboys out here singing. What would happen if they were each owning a little ranch in the olden days of the West and there was only a little bit of water available? Some people have had disputes and fights over water. And I've heard told that some people have been killed over water. Other civilizations worship water. And I know a place where they pray for water. Water sometimes comes too much, too fast, creates flooding. Just a week or so ago, the cyclone that went into Bangladesh over by India killed over 100,000 people. A cyclone is a low-pressure storm that is like a vacuum and it pulls water up. And the country of Bangladesh is on the delta of the Ganges River, and a delta is a marshy, low-lying area right by the seashore. And so to raise the level even 2 feet, you'll flood quite a bit of the country. And there was a 20-foot tidal surge when that storm hit Bangladesh. So that's the reason for so many deaths. It created massive flooding. Well, we said that 70% of the Earth's surface is covered with water, but 97% of that water is in the oceans, and the oceans are salty So we can't use it for very many things. We can't put it on our crops. We can't drink it. It takes the sun's evaporation into the clouds and rain over the land to purify it and leave the minerals behind so that we can use it. 97% of the water on the earth is in the form of salt water in the ocean, so only 3% is available as fresh water. And of that 3%, more than 2% of it is in the Antarctic and in the Arctic in the form of ice caps. So less than 1% is fresh water in our lakes and rivers. Water is a peculiar substance. We don't really use it, and then it's gone. We use it and reuse it. The hydrologic cycle restores the same molecules to their same form in a pure condition. When you want to talk about statistics, there's one that comes kind of close to home here. They've been working for about a month and a half or 2 months out on the airport. And they've used over 6 million gallons of water just in settling the dust and compacting the earth on the airport out there. 6 million gallons. When you look at how much water there is in the earth, it's a fantastic number. There's 326 million cubic miles. A cubic mile is a mile long, a mile wide, and a mile high. 326 million cubic miles of water. And in 1 cubic mile, there's 1 million gallons. That's a lot of water. We said that human beings were 65% water. Elephants are 70% water, and that's why they're bigger. The lowly potato is 80% water, like the pineapple. And the good old tomato is 95% water. I think you're kind of wondering when I'll run out of facts. Well, I'm just about done. Whoop. Really, I'm just about done for it. Water is the only substance that appears on the earth in all 3 states of matter at normal conditions. Water is in the form of vapor or a gas in the atmosphere. Water is in the form of a liquid as water in the lakes, rivers, and in your water taps. And water is in the form of a solid. Do you guys know what a solid is? Do you know what a solid is? Do you know what a liquid is? Something you pour. What's a solid? Can you pour it? How is water a solid? Can you think of how water is when it's a solid? Anybody? How is water when it's a solid? Ice. That's right. An ice cold glass of water. I'll bet you'd like one about right now. So would I. Parched throat. Okay. Water's used all over the place. You know, we have our biggest water user is industries. They use it in the processing of a lot of products we enjoy every day. It takes 115 gallons of water to make enough wheat, to grow enough wheat to make 1 loaf of bread. Industry accounts for about 52% of all the water used in the United States today. Agriculture to irrigate the land constitutes another 45%. Between the two of them, that doesn't leave much for us to drink. Agriculture and industry taking up over 90%. Well, we use water for manufacturing everything from automobiles to zippers. If you're in school, you should have caught that one. automobiles to zippers, A to Z. That's about like when I tell them in school, too. It's a universal solvent. We use it to clean everything. It is necessary in all of our metabolic processes. Plants don't have teeth in their roots, so they have to dissolve the nutrients into the water and then absorb the water to get the nutrients into the plant. And then when we eat the vegetables and fruits, we have to use water in our metabolism in order to undo the energy. It's necessary in our breathing, in our digestion. Our whole metabolic process, even within the cells, involves water. So it's a very essential element. The average American uses about 70 gallons of water a day. And we use it for all kinds of other things: canning, freezing, soft drinks, air conditioning to keep you cool, producing electric power, transportation so that you can go down the river or be up a creek, recreation. We can swim in it, fish in it, sail in it. We can sit beside it and watch the river go by, babbling, like some students in my class. We can sit by a waterfall and watch the thunder and roar. I mean, hear the thunder and roar. And we can sit on the ocean and watch it wave to us. Water's very essential. Well, we do have a good bargain in water. I'd like to show you some statistics now. That being about 5 feet high, where the rope is. All right, you guys. With that rope being about 5 feet high, if you were to fill the sides in so it would hold water, and fill that tank clear full of water, that would have 10,000 gallons in it. And we sell you that for the lowly price of $18. $18. I have another statistic for you. Those 8 feet are going to put one on their neck that's 3 feet high. If you use more than this 10,000 gallons right here, we'll sell you 1,000 gallons more for 20 cents. 20 cents, 1,000 gallons. If you were to fill up that little square that they're making there with water, it's 20 cents worth of water after you pay your $18. And I know Uncle Joe's going to come up after this program and he's going to say, all the water you sell to my house, I want to be after the 10,000 minimum. I want that 20-cent water. I went down to the store today just to price out some comparisons. If you want to drink water, that's what it's going to cost you. If you want to drink milk, this guy here, I misquoted the price, so I better get it right this time. If you want to drink milk at $2.29 a gallon, if you were to fill up that little square, not the big one, but the little one there, it would cost you $2,290 if it was milk. $2,290. And there's a few people around, particularly high school age people, that like to drink some soda pop occasionally. If you were to fill that little tank up with soda pop and pay the same price as what you're paying for it in the cans, it'd cost you $5,300 for that much water. And we're selling you water for 20 cents. That's half a soda pop can. I think we've got a good deal. But then there's some people We're coming to you guys. Then there's some people that don't like to drink milk or soda pop. So what I did is went down and figured out what it would cost for hairspray. Not that you have to drink it, but you know, I just wanted to give a comparison. If you filled that little container there up with hairspray, it'd cost you $66,000. You're going to get out the spray bottles from now on, aren't you? But then that kind of chokes you up, so I priced out Vicks cough syrup. If you want to buy some Vicks cough syrup and put it into that littlest container in there, it'll cost you $140,000. Are you catching on? But then there's the big tough guys that say, well, I haven't heard anything yet that applies to me. I was going to say they don't use hairspray, but I think they do nowadays. So I went down and priced the Old Spice aftershave. And if you want some Old Spice aftershave, enough to last you for at least 2 or 3 weeks, the way some guys use it, fill up that little container, and it'll cost you $180,000 just to have that much aftershave. I wouldn't be doing aftershave anymore. I'd do everything before shave. That's pretty expensive. So you can see that 20 cents for 1,000 gallons is a good deal. Now you notice with that being, I had to put it around their shoulders to be 5 feet high. Yeah, I noticed some of you noticed that. That was so they could keep their head above water. Now there's a way to keep your head above water. We certainly do appreciate your support. Water, what a bargain. Thank you.
sunshine and deplore the rain, reclining when the days are dark and drear. Can we hope for pleasures yet deny the pain, or share the joys of life without a tear? Sunshine and rain, refreshing, reviving rain, light of faith and love, showers from above. Sunshine and rain to nourish the growing grain, send us, Lord, the sunshine and the rain.
I want to give you a few more facts about the Colorado River. And this is very vital to us because we are a part of the Colorado River Basin, and the water that we use is considered in that area. Demand has finally exceeded the river's capacity to support the Southwest. For a river bigger than life, such a condition seems unthinkable. Plunging from frozen heights of 14,000 feet on the continental spine, the Colorado rides for 1,450 miles. It etches the Rocky Mountains and carves in the bottom of the mile-deep Grand Canyon. For only 56 years have its red mud floods been under control. As rivers are measured, the Colorado has only a few superlatives. Its elevational drop is the greatest in North America. It is one of the siltiest before the dams where it carried an average load of 380,000 tons a day. And it is one of the saltiest, carrying 9 million tons of salt a year. Although it ranks 7th in length in the United States, its water volume has averaged only 15 million acre-feet of water yearly since 1905. The Columbia empties 192 million, and the Mississippi more than 400 million. The Colorado system binds the Southwest in a semi-arid 244,000 square mile drainage area, an area larger than France, and divides the region as no other element has. State against state, rural against urban, or Indian against white, it has earned the reputation as the most legislated, litigated, and debated river in the world. In 2 years of tracing the Colorado, I was stunned by the magnitude of what it was asked to do. The Colorado grows grapes in New Mexico, brews beer in Colorado, raises minnows in Utah, floats rafts in Arizona, lights jackpots in Nevada, nurses elk in Wyoming, and freezes ice for California, and sweetens cantaloupes in Mexico. It brings life to 21 million people and more than 2 million acres of farmland in 7 states and 2 counties. I thought that would be some interesting facts because we're in that area. Now, I'd like to read a couple of items from Uncle Roy, and then we will hear some more historical information from Scott. This was given March 24th, 1974 by Uncle Roy. Some years ago, the Spirit of the Lord worked upon the minds of 3 or 4 men, and they got together and wrote a letter to the priesthood offering their property as a starting place for the gathering of the saints. After some deliberation and consideration of other offers that had come in, the priesthood accepted our offering. They made a trip to this place and talked with us. The Lord was kind enough to us to have this place dedicated for the gathering of the saints at this time. A meeting was held, and great promises were offered by the Lord upon this goodly land. Prophecies were pronounced upon the land that this was choice above all other spots of ground in the surrounding country. In fact, the statement was made that the time would come when 1 acre of this ground would produce more than 10 acres of the best soil in Salt Lake Valley. Now this is quite an offer to our people. Now again in March the 9th, 1975, God has provided a way to water the dry ground. You can go down on this land and dig wells anywhere and get water. If we were living right, we could have green the year around. I have asked the Lord to send the rain, and He has sent it. I have asked Him to stay it, and He has stayed it. I know these things can be done. There are a few people that know that this has been done who have had the testimony of my experience. The Scriptures are full of it, where the Lord has sent rain by the mouths of His prophets, and He has stayed the rains by the mouths of His prophets. And if He wants to destroy a people, He can just withhold it. We'll now hear some historical information about the water system from Scott.
I'm beginning to think I wasn't the first one here. There's a lot of names up there. I'm sure we've missed a lot of others. The 2-inch galvanized steel water line that I spoke of earlier, installed by the CCC camp, was the beginning of our pressurized culinary water system. As time marched on and more demand was placed on the system, wells had to be dug deeper, and it became increasingly more difficult to obtain water in the quantities needed. At the time of the 53 raid, there were many windmills set over these hand-dug wells. Most had an open storage tank constructed of the native sandstone. Some had a small elevated tank in the windmill tower. Washing clothes was done on the old scrub board until the days of the gas-powered washing machine. And mind you, this wasn't a Unimac. This was an old motorized washer, the old Maytag. Looked a lot like the old Ringer we have today. It had a motor, a gas motor underneath. The first ones come out, you'd get it set just right, choke the motor a little, whatever it took to do it. Give it a yank and hope it'd start. And when they knew that it'd work, they'd come out with one with a stomp pedal. It had a mechanism that you would stomp the pedal. It'd give the motor a flip to start. And when they knew they worked good. But when they got old, you'd see people out there, they'd fuss with the motor, give it a stomp, give it a stomp, give it a stomp, and it still wouldn't start. Sometimes this process went on for an hour before you get the motor to start. When there was a washing machine in town, believe me, it got used. And the water was heated on a kettle on the stove. You just didn't turn on the hot water tap, and hot water come and you just go on. In the Hilldale area where the water wasn't available from the CCC line and the wells couldn't be had, it was carried by hand from the old Lartson ditch for everything. So you can understand by that that the people upstream had to have some considerations for those that was downstream. Uncle Fred tells of the time when Grandpa Jessup himself and some helpers fixed the pipeline up Jans Canyon, 2 or 3 miles away from Hilldale. And they carried all the pipe, the wrenches, the threader, all that it took to fix that line from Hilldale and back. He says that's part of what's the matter with his back today. Another time, the men were working on the Lauritsen Ditch, installing some concrete pipe sections through some trouble areas. And these sections of cement pipe were carried by hand to where they were to be used from the truck, which wasn't close to where they could use them. My father, Virgil Y. Jessup, said the work was so strenuous that when they got the pipes where they were going and set them down, they shoveled ditch to rest. And there was a lot of shoveling ditch to be done. The winds blew back then too. And the floods would come. All the little streams that came down the side of the mountain would wash through the ditch to fill it with silt. It was in the late 50s when many of these open ditches were cement lined in an effort to reduce the water loss into the sand as they flowed by.
While they're getting ready for this next number, a little story came to mind that I heard once about this Baptist minister that was preaching to his crowd, and he really got wound up, and he said, the gospel is free. It's free, like the water we drink and the air we breathe. It's free. Brothers and sisters, take of it. It's free. And when he got through, they passed the plate around, and this old lady saw him and didn't want to put any money in the plate. He said, Reverend, I thought you said this water was free. He said, well, it is. It's free. But when we pipe it to you, you have to pay for the piping. And so that's kind of the way it is with Richard. We now have, for your entertainment and education and what all, a performance by the Twin City Waterworks Orchestra. And this will be conducted by Richard Alradowski. They will play Musette by Bach. Since this program is about wind a little bit, I guess you all were aware of how bad the wind was a few days ago. We're going to have some tall tales from Joe and Dan. And I drove into town the other day, came over the Barry Knoll, and I saw Dan, what I thought was Dan, out there in the field flying a kite on that day. When I got up closer, I found out it was an old bedstead with a log chain for a tail. That's how hard the wind was blowing. It was blowing so hard that it blew a cook stove right out of the house, blew it clear across the valley, and then in a little while the wind changed and it blew it back again. And then it came again and got all the pots and pans. Anyway, I've known the biggest storytellers in the whole West. I've known the three biggest storytellers. One of them is Dan Jessup, and the other two is Joe Jessup. So we're going to hear some tall tales from those boys.
Pretty fine. I was just wondering out loud about what if you decided to go on a little hunting trip, just like up the canyon, and you had your rifle all loaded up, and you was sneaking up the canyon there, and suddenly you see a lion over here and a bull after you over here. What would you shoot first?
Oh, Dan, I'd shoot that lion every time. We can shoot that bull any time.
Sure been a windy day.
No, Dan, Thursday.
Me too. Let's go get a drink.
All right, before you do, wondering how you enjoyed that supper.
Don't mention it. Don't mention it. It's a good deal like the financial question before Congress.
How's that?
Why, it's apt to come up any time.
Oh, not now.
Oh, that reminds me, you remember when we stopped at the Doug Cook's camp the other day?
Yeah.
How sparkling those dishes was.
Yeah, I remember.
How do you think you got 'em like that?
Well, I was curious about that, too. I offered to help him do the dishes, and he didn't seem to want me to. So I kind of observed what went on. After we got through supper, he took those dishes outside and laid them on a board. I asked him before how he done dishes, and he says 3 waters.
What do you mean 3 waters?
Well,
We
I
always
couldn't-
use 2.
Well, what happened, he got out there and he gave a big old whistle and he says, "Here, 3 waters."
I hear you and Farley been doing a lot of irrigated farming this summer. How's the crops look?
Oh, they're good, Dan. You know that Farley, he grows big potatoes. You know that Merlin, he's been hauling a lot of barnyard manure down there on a 10-acre field. Well, we took a small potato seed like this down there and planted it in that field. It started to grow. It grew, and Farley kept watering it, and kept growing. I guess it got its roots down into moisture and subterranean water aquifer or something, but it just kept growing. It grew bigger and bigger and bigger. Finally, it pushed all the fences down around that 10-acre field.
Can't believe it.
Well, that's how it was. What have you been doing?
Oh, we've been working on a pretty good little project. Gets pretty tall. To give you an idea how high it was, I dropped this hammer the other afternoon. It never hit the ground till the next day at noon.
Boy, now that is a tall project. For God's sakes, what are you making?
We're building the kettle to cook his tater in.
Well, you got another project yet. How are you going to get it in it?
I don't know, get the wind to blow it, I guess.
You know, Dan, things being tough as they are, we haven't got much food left. There's really only enough for one meal. I suggest we save it till morning. Guy that has the best dream gets the food.
Okay, I'll go for that. Morning, Joe.
Morning.
What'd you dream last night?
Oh, Dan, I had a good dream. Why, it was so good I can't even tell you. I dreamed the angels come down from heaven and gathered me up in a big overgrown Easter basket thing, just wafted me off to heaven. And I felt so good I didn't have an acre of pain anywhere. I just felt wonderful.
I seen you leaving. I figured you wouldn't want to come back, so I ate the food.
You know, folks, I recently had an operation on one of my eyes, and I can see almost as good as I used to could. Just for example, Dan, you see that lizard up there on that water tank, crawling almost up the top of the water tank? You see that? There's a fly right there, boy, crawling up towards that lizard. I suppose when it gets there, he reach out his tongue and grab it.
I can't see him, but I can sure hear him walking.
That darn Merrill.
Where
Don't see him out there anywhere, do you? He's been hounding me to dig him a well down there by his gravel works, wash stand with. Between trying to get this program going and all the other things, I haven't had much time to monkey with it. I've been worrying about how he's going to get it done and how long it was going to take.
Well, I've been wondering too, and I fetched this tape along.
Yeah.
I thought we'd stretch it out here and see how long this project is going to drag out.
Yeah.
I've been wondering how many people there are here who have had the experience of having a bath in a number 3 galvanized tub and in front of an old pot-bellied stove, and then bend down to get the towel and forget what was behind you. Well, I've had that experience. And there's other experiences too, and we're going to hear from you-know-who.
Only the old timers know what that one is.
Times were tough. The electricity coming to town in the early 1960s began a new era for the water system here. Wells were dug with mechanized equipment to greater depths and electric-powered pumps were installed. Many of the old wells had small electric pumps installed in them. More lines were laid, just connecting the next line onto the existing small line. Water was pumped directly into the system at whatever point a well could be had. Pressure would build up to an extreme high in the night time when there was no water use, and would get extremely low when everyone was trying to shower at once to go to the dance. There was no storage until the early 60s, when a 4-inch line from Maxwell Canyon and a 63,000-gallon storage tank were constructed up on the saddle above Hilldale. There were many people come from Salt Lake in those days to help, and this would have helped accomplish this task. This is when the backhoes were first used here. The major task of putting the Lauritsen ditch into a pipeline was undertaken in the 60s and was completed in 1967 after 40 years of labor. By running the water through a pipeline and getting rid of the leaks, the usable water was nearly doubled and had sufficient pressure to sprinkle without a pump. The length of the old ditch was a little over 3 miles, 16,429 feet to be exact, from Water Canyon to the old reservoir west of the Phelps Elementary School. The population grew. More wells were put into service. Lines extended to more homes and businesses until in 1971 there were 220 hookups. At that point, 1971, Twin City Water Works was organized. And if you can read on that board over there, that was the water board. Uncle Fred Jessup, Edson Jessup, Joe Barlow, Joe Jessup, and Richard Allred. After Edson's demise in 1980, Jerry Jessup was appointed to fill that position on the board. The fee for a water hookup was set at $100, with a $7.50 monthly charge. There were no meters, so that was a flat rate. These men went to work with the political powers that be, and with the assistance of a lawyer, Charles Ditch in Phoenix, put together a major water improvement project that was constructed in 1978. The project had to be reduced to match the funding that was available. This money came through the FHA, the Farmers Home Administration, in the amount of $300,000 as a grant, and a loan from FHA also of $325,000 on a 40-year note. The water project included a water treatment plant, the 400 gallon per minute capacity, for the removal of iron and manganese. The iron and manganese is what made the old red, deep red stain wherever the water touched. And we're not through fighting that. The hookup fee was raised to $300 at that time, the monthly minimum to $18, with a 20-cent per thousand overage charge over 10,000 gallons per month. We had 290 hookups at the organization of Twin City Water Works. Many projects have been added since that time without government help. Hookup fees have been raised to $1,500, with the other charges still the same today. Our total water sales for last year amounted to $140,000. The total number of hookups at present is at 483, of which 10 of those are a 2-inch hookup. That's the same size as the original line that came out of Jan's Canyon. We presently operate 8 different wells into the culinary system and 2 springs. These wells range in depth from 90 feet to 600 feet deep. Ironically enough, those 2 are about 20 feet apart on the surface of the ground. One in one aquifer and one in another. We have one deep well that's been drilled and is not in production yet, but we hope to get through all the regulations and get that put into service to help us get through this summer. All sources combined at present at peak production produce about 1,100 gallons per minute, or just over 1.5 million gallons a day. So you can see we've outgrown our treatment facility by about 3 times. And we're actually at about the same point we were in 1978, in great need of a major improvement again. In the irrigation system today, there are 15 different wells, plus the water canyon water and 2 large reservoirs. Just a few of the projects that have been completed that I could put together here. The Leroy S. Johnson Company finished the sump, which is classified as a horizontal well and is just north and a little west of here in the creek, in 1961. Reservoir number 2, which is the one below the water tank, was completed in 1970. This reservoir has a clay core that reaches 40 feet down into the ground underneath the embankment of that reservoir. That's before you start to build the dam. It also goes 30 feet up through the dam, so there's 70 feet of clay to seal that water into the reservoir so it won't begin to seep and cause a failure there. And this clay was hauled from over into Utah about 3 miles out past village homes to this point. So we actually moved a hill from Utah to Arizona. There was a flood control project completed in 1973. Reservoir number 1 was completed in 1975. This is the old original reservoir, is why it's number 1. It was completed after number 2. It was the pond where Uncle Rich's girls drowned before the big reservoir was made like it is now. It was where the Southside irrigation ditch first run to in 1967. We also have a sewer system now, and built under the direction of Hilldale Town. It was completed in 1981. You can't have that much water running and that many people living here without taking care of the other end of things. We had a major expansion on our own, the first major one after the government help, in 1984. Laid many miles of water main, much sewer main, manholes, all that pertains, with all donated labor and equipment. Our last major project in December of 1990, I have a few more of the more specific details. With the assistance of W.W. Steed & Company of Salt Lake City and much local help, there was installed approximately 4,800 feet of 8-inch water main on the culinary system, 5,300 feet of 6-inch main, 9 more fire hydrants, 39 valves. In addition to this, there was over 3,300 feet of 10-inch water main installed to take the place of some of the old irrigation line that is now rusting out in spots. Besides the many homes and gardens we have, there is now under cultivation over 1,000 acres of land in the Short Creek Valley, compared to about 20 in the early days. But our challenges are not over, but under the direction of Uncle Rulon and with the help of the Lord, we'll continue on.
We certainly hope that you've enjoyed the program so far. It's running a little bit over the time that we had planned to take. But while we're getting ready for the slideshow, which shouldn't take too long, I want to say a few words about a very wonderful helper that we all know about by the name of Uncle Fred. He's been a vital part of the water company. He's been a vital part of the social structure of our town. He's just been a vital part to this whole community. And I got to tell you a little story about when he was young, quite young when he first came here. He was really a handyman. He had a shoe shop, and he was doing just about everything. And Lewis was trying to pay him a compliment, and he says, "Uncle Fred sure is a handicap to Short Creek, isn't he?" We'd like to hear a word or two from Uncle Fred.
It's been a pleasure to see how these people have carried on and put this program on without me. It's been my grand pleasure to stand at the side of Uncle Roy in the days of the development of these projects. And to be his errand boy and trying to carry out and get things going. It involved many, many trips and negotiations and finding means to make things go. And it's just simply grand. I can't take enough time, nor do I have enough words to express how I feel having been involved in this. And now the various aspects of these organizations and these water filings and so on that's taken so much. Every well has to have a permit. The water that runs on the surface has to be adjudicated, and when Utah water runs across the state line, then you not only have the Utah permits to deal with, it becomes Arizona's water, and we've had to deal with Arizona. So it's been quite a thing. And one little thing that happened since Uncle Roy's demise is one of the filings we've had in his name, which is the sump, was the Leroy S. Johnson Company. And that had to be transferred into Short Creek Southside Irrigation Company, of which President Jeffs is the president. And as I say, all of these aspects and negotiations, these organizations and so on, the way I look at it is now like it was in Uncle Roy's day. Uncle Rulon is like the sun, and these organizations revolve around the sun like the solar system. And so the great need we stand in for water and the great perplexity that the future offers to us, let me remind us that our preparation is one of the things that we can do, we must do in order to get water. Among those prophecies that were uttered was one that 1,000 acres would be irrigated from a single well. This is the Lord's work. He knows how to send water. He knows how to bring it from distant places in the sky to this place, and rather than worry and stew and get into consternation about what we're going to do for water, let's get prepared so that we can ask the Lord. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, and He can provide. Let's prepare for the Lord to bless us. I ask in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
And sometimes the lack of it. This is the reservoir out by the landfill. We remember a time Uncle John and Uncle Roy had many dreams about this place. And for our betterment. Joe S. remembers those good times. This is the stream at Water Canyon. We've put a lot of effort into getting that stream down to our fields. This is the watershed up in the Maxwell Canyon area. This is up in the Maxwell Canyon. You notice that leaking pipe up there? The 63,000 gallon tank up on the saddle. This is some of the pipe coming out of the Maxwell Canyon area. Part of that 10-inch pipe that we've put in 65 and 66. Some of it's rusting away, and here it is exposed from the weather. We had great pioneers like Uncle Rich, put in many hours, many days, helping us to put in our water systems. Scott and Joe. Uncle Joe's traveled great distances to help our situation. This was a meeting in Tucson for our soil conservation. We go to great depths to bring water. That's Scott at one of the wells. And here he is up in the canyon at the watershed. That's Jeffrey planning for some of the pipe and plans that we've had to use to put it where we need it. And Uncle Fred went to Phoenix to buy the pipe. Here's Uncle Fred and Harold after they brought a load home. This was for the pipe when we laid in it in the 84 project, sewer and water. There's Hiram helping us spread the pipe out onto the project. And some of his crew that helped us. We like to enjoy a summer's evening. Water can also be destructive. This is a flood of 82. This is a 10-foot diameter culvert. Can't help that. This is a diversion dam that was washed out at that time. That bank over there is 8-10 feet high. This street we plan to pave this summer. That day in 82 it was paved with water. And this was the result at the creek crossing on Richard Street. Notice that sewer pipe hanging out. This represents some of our effort to maintain the creek crossings. This is behind the Central Street crossing, and there it is just before we installed that part. Here's Scott on a 10-inch irrigation line out on the farms, crossing the creek. Some of Joe S.'s helpers putting the pipeline in out on the farms. And if some of you didn't notice, the background music here is from Georges Handel, called Water Music. This is one of the reasons why we like to have plans and maps of what we do and where we go. And notice how crooked that, curved that line is? This is over at the well by the dairy barn. Potato barn. This is the old well rig that we've used for many years. It's when it was up here in the cove, just about a half a mile east of where we are now. Uncle Fred and Joe making it happen for us. And Uncle Parley and Merlin with Joe there on the farm. Testing out the wells after one of them was dug. This is a well over by the water plant. Putting the pump in. That's a pretty good sized pump. And there we've got water flowing from it. This is inside the treatment plant when we built it. There's a lot of pipes and electronics that went into making that thing work. This is the big filters that we've got installed there. They're really quite small for the need that we have today. Here's the old drag line up on the diversion in the canyon. And there's a drag line on one of our best producing wells. It's the sump in the creek. Then on the old 24 cat. And here we're building the inlet to the number 2 reservoir that's just a little ways from here, 2 blocks. There we've got the concrete installed. Here's where a lot of our water goes. That's the sewer treatment plant just before the first pond was clear full. And we use a lot of water around our homes. Water our crops, keep our men going. In 64 and 65, Joe S. took a crew and went to Hackberry and Ash Fork, gathered up some tanks from the railroad. We used this structure inside those tanks to dismantle them and to re-establish those tanks once we got them back. One we installed on this knoll to use for water. It never held any water for our town, but we put some good effort into it. Most of those tanks are used for granaries. We've got a new well that stands on that mound now, a new tank. Supplies us during the down times. Here's one of our later projects with Scott, installing a fire hydrant. I believe this is where we was lowering the road up there by the creek crossing on Central. Some of the pipes, there's a cross in the line where a 6-inch line goes 4 directions. It's where we was working last winter, up in the canyon. A celebration. There's working on one of the wells. This has been a while ago. This is the diversion catchment, the gates that let the water into the south side irrigation, the overflow structure, and the truck is down in the creek to the side of it. Here we were last winter, Scott in the track hoe and Uncle Dan in the new Cat, rebuilding a section of the south side irrigation across from Uncle Newell's. Bringing the Cat out of that creek, at the ditch. This is back in '84. That's Steed's 880 track hoe, where we're installing the line across the fields out towards the Berry Knoll subdivision area. And here we are digging underneath the big 10-foot culvert on Arizona Avenue, going towards the dairy. And here we've got the pipe up around the corner by Alma Fisher's on the state line, Juniper Street. Steed Ranches, Uncle Newell and his boys provided the big digger there for us to put in the pipeline at that time. That was a pretty major project. This is coming up Arizona Avenue. And here we've got Merrill Steed in the trench and a lot of concrete to preserve the pipe at the creek crossing at the mouth of the canyon in Maxwell Canyon. There's Scott and his crew in the new track hoe. And his backup crew from home. And here's when he's just about finished rebuilding the trencher that we use. This is one we tested out. We didn't keep it. We tested that up in the canyon on the park. It's Lyle's Cat. We used quite a bit of equipment from the various men around town to help us build our projects. This is the track hoe when we first went and bought the American at Lehigh. This is a little illustration of the depth that we go to. We've got some that are deeper than that. Pray tell, Scott, I don't know how you got into it, but how did you get out of that one? This is some of the fun that we find digging our trenches through our town. This is on Arizona Avenue out in front of Uncle Parley's house. Anybody miss a call? This one we can thank the good Lord for keeping Uncle Dan with us. He was on that cat when that rock came down. He scrambled for safety, barely got out of the way. That big rock took a lot of work to get off of that cat. straightened up the pipes and drove it down the hill. That's up in the watershed in the canyon. Two years ago, we made a big project to dig the reservoir number 2 to clean out the silt out of the bottom. There's Uncle Fred and Joe directing the work. We removed 12 feet of silt from the center of that. Took a massive amount of work and equipment, men, in several days. We had a little snow to help us on that day. Here's Joe S. staking out the ditch line to go around the outside of that reservoir. And there's some of the crew that came by on a Sunday afternoon to review the work. Some of the Steve boys. There's Arnold on one of the big scrapers. This is what the reservoir up in the canyon looked like, water canyon, just after we cleaned it out. Looking up the canyon. This is reservoir number 1 with some good old water in it. We're planning for some more growth in the future. And we, being on Uncle Rulin's team, will make it happen. We can help that prophecy come true. We look forward to a bountiful and beautiful harvest. Joe and Dan and Arnold helping on that one harvest. We're very grateful for Uncle Fred and his many, many hours of investment into all of us and help to make our projects work. Helps to make the dream come that Uncle Roy had about this wonderful place and this wonderful people. And with Uncle Rulin, we'll carry on that dream.